You said we have to confront the void and the total emptiness, and I realize that's the two main fears about death, physical pain, and the confronting of the total void, because there's a misunderstanding.
Well, remember, the total and void includes you. There is no one in the void. That's what it means to be in the void. You no longer exist. So there's no one to be afraid. There's no affect left in the void, right? The fear is always the rejection of the void. It's the refusal of it, because that there is more love for the ego than there is for God. When your love for God is greater than the love for your ego, you will immediately cross beyond the void into the fullness of God's heart and love, and you will realize even the void was an illusion. It's just a transition, right? You have to go through the negation of your identity, right? Before you go into the realization of your true identity. The false one has to be let go. So there has to be this moment when you don't know who you are because you are not, right? But there is no one there. Just the empty consciousness itself that then realizes itself as the infinite presence that is always alone and yet never lonely and never in fear and always in creative beautification of the field of consciousness itself. Because that's all God is about, is beauty, right? Truth and beauty. And that's what you are. So you have no reason to fear anything once you realize that that's what you're going toward.
Okay. That's really helpful that it's a transition, because when you said you have to confront it, I was thinking, who has to confront it?
Well, ultimately, it will be the awakening of the soul to the fact that you never were the ego. You never were the body, and you can't keep up the charade anymore when the body is gone, right? Or when its narrative is gone, if the ego mind is gone. Then all the soul is, it's not an entity, it's simply the negation, the state of negation, neti, right, they say. So, but the soul, that negation is neither the ego nor God. But once the negation opens up to the affirmation of the real, then all along it couldn't have been anything else but one with God.
Okay, thank you. That's really very helpful. And the void could also be said to be love then.
Yes, in a sense, the void is your willingness out of love to empty out of the ego in order to be filled with God. So it's because you have love for God that you are willing to become the void that is filled with that redemption, right? Because that's what salvation is to be filled with God's love and light. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Namaste.
You mentioned that the POMO is lacking, or the postmodern mind is lacking, a fear of God. Can you talk about the cultivation of the fear of God and how that relates to loving God?
Well, the fear of God is really the fear of the loss of God's love, right? The problem is that the post-modern ego, to use that term, never had it was trained not to believe. And it was given such an environment that lacked the attributes of beings who were in the state of divine love in the family system. Usually there's a shortage of divine love these days, right? So there came a point where the ego could no longer believe in anything. It became completely cynical and nihilistic. So it couldn't believe in God, it couldn't believe in itself, it couldn't believe in love. It had been betrayed, and too many times, too many disappointments, right, built on each other. And so the heart was closed and in a state of self-defense, not of openness to joy. So the question I think you must ask yourself is, how do I want to leave this life? Do I want my heart to be open? And do I want to go to God because I have achieved that longing? That's a fear of going to some other bardo state and having to find myself in the uterus of another unloving mother and go through it all again. So, you can choose your destiny, and that's all you can choose. But the moment you do choose, then you will be opened up. You will become the void that will receive that love and that power that will renew your faith. Because the heart is dying from a lack of the light that gives it the capacity for psychosynthesis, right? It's not photosynthesis, but it's the capacity of consciousness to grow to that level that, like the bird, it pecks its way out of the shell, right? And you want the strength to get out of the ego shell and to fly again, right? And so there's a part of you that even at this moment is afraid of missing out on growing your angel wings and flying and remaining earthbound, right? That's the fear of God, and also the love of that flight into freedom that you have secretly always been longing for, but looking in the wrong places.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And it kind of reminds me of the way you were describing at least one of the definitions of anxiety in the last retreat, of this kind of tension of knowing that you want to align at a deep level and then having it repressed, basically.
Yes. You're in a tug-of-war, just like that myth, right, of ancient India, the demons, the asuras, and the devas. And you haven't decided which side you want to win. When you have, and you join on one side, it's over, right? But you have to make a choice, because part of you wants the ego life and its enjoyments and its attachments, and the other part realizes you're going to lose it anyway. Why not get the grace that's possible now rather than feel destroyed at the end and you've lost everything, and right, that horror. And rather than face the end with dread, face it with the joy, of the good news that you are expressing from a state of rapture, not just about the rapture, but you're in it.
Thank you. I have one more question. Sure. You said in the meditation, I think the first line was enter into the space of the heart. Mm-hmm. And I was curious, what came up was the question of, what is that related to this idea of witnessing, and related to the soul, and related to the Buddhi? All of these terms kind of, I was realizing they kind of all came up in that moment. And I was curious if you could explain a little bit how those relate.
It's a set of wavelengths, a portion of the spectrum of consciousness that begins at chakra 4 and goes to chakra 6. Where you have 4 and 5, which are love and wisdom. Those chakras are the emanations from the vortex of the infinite into your individual consciousness of the energies that then can integrate and create the fulfillment of one's understanding, one's compassion, and one's capacity to be the instrument of the will of God, okay, at a given moment when that is called upon, right? Which ends up being at every moment, right? But it's that. Does that answer that question?
I think so. I mean, I'll take that in. Okay. That's good enough. Meaning that's very, very beautiful. And I think all of the terms that I was kind of curious about relate.
Okay, yes, the terms, the Buddhi and all of that.
Yeah.
They all of those terms that you're talking about are aspects of the fourth and fifth assemblage points. The Buddhi, meaning the Buddha nature, opens up then, right? But also the divine love, sainthood, Christ consciousness, right? And chakra 4, the sacred heart. So the union of those two then lead to another level of consciousness. Chakra 6 and 7 are in a different wavelength set, and then an entirely different dimension of reality opens up in those chakras that can't even be grasped. But it's the 4 and 5 are like the bodhisattva level, where there is compassion and understanding of what everyone is going through, because you have understood the logic of the ego and its inability to align with the reason that is the intelligence of God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shunyam. I'm curious to know more about those different registers of mind. Like you said, the logic is more coming, sounds to me like it's coming more from the ego level, where it can think out things and make strategies and make the decisions on creating solutions. But then there's this level of reason, and I think you mentioned it was like Plato called it the nous, and it's this the soul's ability to know the divine. And is it possible to bring that level of reason into one's mind? Because I can see how, like, I feel like I'm understanding the ego's logic more, and being able to recognize how much of a trap it is, and how trapped I feel I'm in it. Mm-hmm. And even though there is this longing for the heart opening that you speak of, and the being of service to God and aligning with the will of God. Mm-hmm. And there is a sense of, like, yes, that's the most important value to hold in my life. And yet the ego's thoughts and the way it makes it's not illogical logic.
It's unreasonable. It's irrational, but it's logical. Yeah.
I feel
okay, but let me point out something to you, that the reason why the logic fails, the logic of the ego, is it does not recognize that, yes, you are identified with the ego, but you are also not identified with the ego. You see, if there wasn't also superimposed with the ego's discourse a realization that you're not the ego, you wouldn't have these questions, right? The questions come from the fact that your reason as a soul is out of sync with the logic of the ego. And so your own mind has become alien to you, or you're alienated from your own patterns of thought that you have outgrown already, but they are habit patterns that you haven't yet been able to release. But they are habits that are less and less favored and desired. And at a certain point, you will lose interest in those habits, because new habits of thought will come. Habits that will come out of your moments of contemplation of God, in which you receive some new insight or some new energy, or just a sense of light that gives you a new approach to a song, or to a way of doing something in the greenhouse, or of serving in some way. But an aspect of your heart that had been asleep will come awake, and things will change, and you will see how that cascades into a change in reality in much more general terms. And then that will produce other changes, and they will cascade and exponentiate. And soon you will be witnessing that you are like in a rocket that's leaving the earth of the ego, and you're already in space, and you're halfway to the sun, and the light of the sun is now what takes over and propels you. The gravity of the sun and the power of that solar energy will take you into another dimension of reality that your ego will not be able to oppose nor to want. It will just have become an obsolete pattern of, let's say, modifications of the mind stuff that will have no more meaning, because something far more meaningful has now appeared.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I feel like I can sense it when I'm looking in your eyes. The amazing power of that, the creative imagination that's able to explain that in words, and yet it's something it's so much more beyond what the words can actually transmit, because my mind is designed to listen to those words and relate to the images they create in my mind.
Yes, your mind is, but your heart is not. And your heart relates because you're at the same frequency. So it is a recognition of yourself. At the same time that there is a recognition that the apparatus that is the operating system of the body is not in tune with that level of your creative intelligence. And so now you're going to connect it, and that will cause the ego to morph into a far more refined, open, surrendered, and empowered level of consciousness that can now give itself to that ultimate level of mind that it cannot control and to which it must surrender.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shunya.
Thank you.
Forgive me in the spirit of being not shy. I have a question that is ridiculous, irrational, very logical. At least I thought so this afternoon when I sat for meditation. And what came over me was this thought. It began with, what is it to be disidentified with the body? And then the thought and the logic started coming. Who is this I that is identified with the body? And this ridiculous example came up, and I want to ask you about it. But it made total sense in the moment. I think of myself, I asked myself the question, where is consciousness in this, let's say, body? And it seems to be right here, right? If I cut this pinky off and put it on the table, I wouldn't think I'm there. I'm still right here. And that same idea, somehow, if I started at the feet and just started cutting, got to the neck, somehow I'm still alive, right? I'm still right here. The body's over there. I am still right here. The consciousness that I feel like I'm operating from is right here. Mm-hmm. I don't know what my question is, but that's the logic.
What you're saying is your sensory apparatus is there.
Right.
Your vision, your smell, your
Yes.
taste, your hearing, right? So your sensory level of consciousness is there. Without that, you won't sense a world. But it doesn't mean your consciousness, like if you go to the guillotine and you lose your head, your consciousness will still be there and you'll see your head on the ground. Remember that beautiful image of Kali, where Kali actually cuts off her own head and then holds it up, right, victorious. I actually had a concept that each of us has to go through what I call a KGB process. Okay, KGB is first we have to be Kali. You have to cut your head off and be victorious and say, see, you know, who needs this, right? And then the G is you become Ganesha. You receive a new head, an elephant head in his case, but that means a head of wisdom. The fundamental mind replaces that individual mind, right? And then the B is the Bhairava, that level of consciousness that contains the destruction of the mind and everything the mind thinks it knows, which is the whole world, because what is the world but made of language? It's made of thoughts, made of imagery. And it is destroyed, and yet it is always redreamed, recreated, and sustained, and evolved into its ultimate level of self-knowledge that cannot be killed, right? So what you're talking about is the level of consciousness of the operating system of the body. But who is actually operating that system is not in the body. That's what you will discover at the death of the body. Does that answer anything?
Yeah, I started kind of going through that, and I realized, like, I realized that consciousness is not in the body, but I'm perceiving it through this this brain, right? This transceiver that's interpreting it in a certain way, and through the eyes that thinks it's seeing something. And I started kind of going through that and using these understandings that we learn here. But I don't know, it was just...
It's a transmission device, okay? But where is the transmission coming from, right? Because thoughts arise in your mind. You don't actually think them. You suddenly have a thought, or you have an emotion. You don't even know why. So you can start crying or laughing without even knowing, right? And you have drives that will cause you to do things, and you wonder, how did I dare do that, or whatever. But they're uncontrollable, right? And so you are not the master over your body just because you think you're in the brain, right? There is the real agency that is moving that body and its system through time and space is from a larger level of consciousness, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And also, like, your answer to Hanuman actually really helped me understand this more, as like there's something more than just the ego asking this question. Otherwise I wouldn't be asking it. There is something more than that. So otherwise I wouldn't have this interest to even ask.
Yeah.
And be curious about that, and kind of go through that process and sit here and ask you more about it.
Yeah.
So
the question of asking is interesting, because what you're wanting is for the truth to be put into language. But it's a truth that you already know cannot be expressed in language. And so what is actually being communicated uses language as kind of an overt contextualization, but the actual message that is transmitted is usually completely superconscious, and there is no actual awareness. It will touch the soul, and it may touch the subconscious and cause activity of another kind, but it will completely circumvent your understanding of what did he just say, or what did he mean by what he said, or why did he say that to me, or what did I say that caused, right? So there are questions that the ego will raise that it cannot answer. So it's in the presence of a mystery. You are that mystery. Thank you. Namaste. There you go.
I don't have any hair.
The Baron is victorious again.
And then I guess what struck me most, and kind of is my kind of end question, if there is one, is you had said it's really preparing for eternal life. And what is that? And is that then just, okay, then I believe in it and coming to know the fundamental mind, and what happens when all of your senses quit working, and what's left, yeah. But.
So there's a parallel track, right, that is always going on so long as the ego narrative is present. And there's a desire to achieve ego death and an equal and opposite desire to delay as long as possible ego death, right? And that oscillation is always going on. So there are 2 steps forward and 3 back, or maybe only 1.5 back, but right? So, but there's a constant oscillation. That's the waveform of the ego mind itself. But then there's this other track in which it has already been achieved, and its unfoldment is happening in such a way that you will become shocked out of your ego in the awe of what you always knew but pretended you were ignorant of. And that pretense at some point will be ripped away. And that's what the moment that your ego dreads is you will be exposed as divine.
Is that the rupture of this going on being? It's the rupture of the ego's going on being.
It's not a rupture, it's the rapture.
It's not a rupture, it's a gain. It's not a lie. Okay, all right. You sold me. No, thank you. Okay.
Blessings for both
Just the
tracks
shock.
reaching the destination.
May I be shocked now?
Lightning bolts, yes.
The question was, what is harmonic mind?
Harmonic mind. Someone asked that online? Harmonic mind. Well, I can only guess what, because, people may use that term in many different ways. It's not one that is part of the vocabulary of Sat Yoga in particular, but how I would... If I were coming up with that term, it would be the level of mind that was able to abide in a state in which the harmonics of the various frequencies of ego, of soul, and of God consciousness were all in harmony with one another, and one was able to create the lost chord in which the entirety of the spectrum of consciousness would become one infinitely beautiful sound. And that sound itself would be the end of the world and its new beginning. And on that note, namaste to all, blessings, and may you succeed in prepping for the eschaton.